Hi, I'm Ethan. I love muzzleloading. Today we're doing a test run of our 18th century trekking and camping equipment in preparation for some events this year. So for the past few months, I have been researching, reading, and making, trying to improve and really recreate some 18th century trekking and camping equipment. This isn't going to be totally perfect. Again, just like the video we published last year about my clothing and my equipment, this is an iterative process for me, but I appreciate you coming along for the journey. My goal here this morning is to do a total dry run of my camp setup from coming in on my horse to unloading here and setting up camp and making breakfast. This is going to be a full test out except for an overnight run here, which we'll do a little bit later, to see how this is working and how my research and my planning has done for me over the past few months. Did not expect to need my first aid kit so soon. To get started here, I have a couple things. I've got a tarp, which we're going to use as the diamond fly in the diamond fly configuration here. I understand that the diamond fly isn't the most accurate for the period, but as far as the community goes, it's a generally accepted shelter, especially for a single person. Now, I'm looking at this equipment here with my trunk, my pack, and this tarp as kind of an individual, a part of a group moving through the woods. As I've talked about previously, I'm kind of exploring a naturalist artist persona, perhaps with a surveying crew as part of my reasoning and what I'm doing in regards to what I'm wearing and how I'm doing things. I'm not looking at this as a Longhunter perspective. I'm looking at this as I'm a city boy in some regard here, out with a group of experienced woodsmen and travelers. And I say that because I think it explains a little bit of my inexperience when it comes to this stuff. So a lot of what I'm doing here is based on the Nicholas Cresswell journals, where he is somebody coming over from Europe, unfamiliar with the trends and the happenings of how things work here in the United States, especially on the frontier. And he's adapting what he knows and learning from those folks that are more experienced. Now, again, that's just going to continue to change as I continue to work on this stuff, but it's the place where I'm starting. Now, when it comes to shelters, I've heard quite a few different opinions on canvas itself. On the frontier, we know that they were used by military campaigns, and I think that's part of the reason why we see them being used so much in civilian contingents here when it comes to camping and events and things. I'm using this with a little bit of that military inspiration behind it, even though many people, and I think rightly, say that your average person on the frontier probably never slept under canvas, working under natural formations when they can. The tent stakes that I'm using here aren't the traditional iron that you might see at a more modern event. I've made these based on George Washington's campaign tent. These are a set of stakes here made out of ash. The originals were made out of oak, but I had some nice ash. And so these are straight split or riven out of an oak blank. These are about 15 inches long or so. And then I've carved and worked them on a shaving horse to shape them to be these natural wooden tent stakes. According to my research, Washington's own tent, the first Oval Office really, and that's where I've gotten this information, had these wooden tent stakes. And then wooden tent stakes were really used, especially in the military, for quite a long time after the American Revolutionary War, up into World War II. So I thought that might be a pretty safe bet for us when it comes to making some tent stakes for this period. That didn't work as well as I'd hoped. I used ash instead of oak, one, because I had some handy, and two, it has a very similar grain structure. So for me, it's kind of a poor man's oak right now. And then in the center of our tent here, this fly is set up to tie off to a tree if we wanted to, but I can also come in here I probably pulled that one out. Okay, that's okay. That's going to be a pretty functional start for us here on our tent. We have a little bit of slouch, a little bit of droop. I'm not too concerned about that right now. That's something that I think, depending on the weather and how things were looking, we would adjust moving forward. Like I said, not setting out to be perfect here, setting out to get this started and give it a try. I'm going to talk a little bit about the trunk that I have here. This is a period ship's chest made out of tulip poplar that my father made many years ago. It has rope handles here on either side, and then hand forged hardware and hand forged hinges back in here. There's a little bit of modern stuff in here, but I want to say that I'm bringing this as a camp appropriate way to store some things to a camp or a small event. I have in here just a little bit of food to share with the camp, and then some of the ancillary things that I'm going to need while at an event. I have everything for my rifles in here and a means to clean them. And with this chest, I can close it up and it works fine in a camp and really works well even as a chair to sit on while at camp. So that's what this is. There's many other ways to do this. Multiple people out there will have crates or containers made up that look period on the outside to store some of the modern amenities and things. Depending on the kind of event that you're going to, the restrictiveness of what you have with you is going to be dictated before you go. For me right now, this is just kind of a general purpose carry tote to sit here with me while at camp. As that's actually going now, I think I want to talk about something else that I'm working on, and that's water. Now, I've talked about this a little bit in my turkey hunting video, but when it comes to these events, depending on how far off the grid you are, you need to carry in your own water, which becomes difficult, but thanks to kind of modern camping and trekking and survival, really, we have plenty of products out there that allow you to carry water in a situation where, unlike the frontier, I can't just go and drink out of the stream. And even with modern filtration practices, I still can't be sure about a water source, especially where I'm at, surrounded by farm ground. So what I've attempted and what I'm working through is carrying this 10-liter MSR water bag. I have two of these. One of them set up for dirty water for filtration if I need to. This is my clean water bag. 10 liters is about 2.6 gallons. So for me, for one man, depending on the weather conditions, this is enough for a couple days. If I use it sparingly, you know, everybody's different. So at camp, much like my trunk here, my ship's chest, I'm keeping a water source of some kind. This isn't cooled or anything, but where I'm at right now, I'm not too concerned about the weather. So from this, I have a couple options to fill out of this. I have this ceramic jug here. You see a ton of ceramic jugs being carried in the period and in paintings and things. I also have in my market wallet here, not my boiler, but I have a copper canteen. Now, traditionally, we know that the canteens would have been some kind of tin, but for what I have right now, this was a gift from my father, so it has a special place in my heart. I have this copper canteen that I can carry. And back at camp, depending on what we're doing that day, if it's a hike or if it's a shoot, I can fill out of my water reservoir here into one of these reservoirs to keep hydrated in camp. And these caps have a couple different ways for you to do this, but this smaller spout's a little bit more controlled. This jug is just over a quart or so, which is plenty for carrying around, walking and talking. Then I can close that up. I can throw it in the back of my camp, and it's not obstructing the atmosphere of an event. So there I have a little bit of water for the morning. In my boiler here, I know it's not accurate necessarily for this period. I can store a few things. So I have in here just some oranges, some small tangerines. But what I'd like to do here, now that we have a fire going, is I'd like to make a little coffee. So I'm going to set my cup on here. In my market wallet here, which is the other thing that I would be carrying on my person apart from my pack, depending on the trek, I have a couple things. Now, there's been a lot of arguments, it seems like, about the market wallet and its practicality. In my experience, since making this one this winter, this is really handy. It's really useful. I know it doesn't go on your body with the cross strap like a haversack that we're used to, but this works really well, much better than you would think just by looking at it, and if you are a haversack carrier. So in this half over here, I have some utensils and some carrying equipment. So I have another little journal here, depending on what I'm doing. I have my bait horn if I need to set out a trot line. And then I have my little frying pan here. I know there was some discussion about the frying pan. It's still in my kit because it's a handy piece of cookware. If I was going to an ultralight event, I would probably leave this at home, but it's handy for what we're doing today. So I'm going to set that kind of at the side here and let it warm up some. So I have my market wallet split into kind of utility, and then the other half is food. I have these little tangerines here, but then along with that, I have some apples depending on the season and the event that we're in. I have an onion for some vegetable. I have a pack of rice in place of parched corn, but I've actually planted some traditional 18th century corn this year to try to make my own parched corn. So with that rice and some of these vegetables and a little bit of fruit, I can really be okay for a little bit. Now, depending on the event that we're at, I also have some protein in here with a little bit of bacon. Now, it's important to remember that in the 18th century, breakfast wouldn't have been eggs and bacon, but it is something that we are fortunate enough to enjoy today. So I'm going to get that warming up. It's a little early on my fire here because we still have some flames going, but I want to get this go ahead and get it started here. This is a small reed container sent to me by a friend of the channel, Alan. I want to thank Alan for sending me this and a couple other things. Alan, I've got this in my kit now, and I'm actually carrying some ground coffee in here. I think traditionally, and it's in Ezra Tilden's journals, really, he was carrying a snuff bottle full of coffee, and you can get a reproduction snuff bottle to match in the 18th century. But for my uses and my purposes here, I'm just carrying it in this reed container. The Deerskin Diary YouTube channel has a great video on making a reed canteen. This is just a smaller version of that to carry some dry goods. It has a wooden plug in here that we can pop open and use as we need to. The coffee in here is Blue Lion coffee. I think this is the Morning Thunder, which I really enjoy. So my water's getting nice and hot here. We'll bring our boiler off, and we're going to pour in a little bit of coffee. Stir that up. We'll shut that for a few minutes. While that's going, we can talk a little bit about sleeping in this kind of setup here. Depending on the weather situation, this would be left open for this fly here. We have a rather short pole at the front and kind of a short interior pole here to keep us low to the ground. But if the weather was getting serious, it's the kind of thing that we could drop our front pole, put in a few more stakes, and try to sleep more comfortably. And the nice thing about this tarp being used in a kind of a vanilla fashion, as I'll say it, in kind of a basic fashion. We can reconfigure this as we need to. So I can set this up and sleep with it as a cover over a hammock if I need to be above the ground. I can set it out as just a fly with a few other posts that I can make really with equipment that I'm carrying, just take a little bit longer. I can set this up and modify it in the field, which is really handy. And I think that's why you see the Diamon fly being used still so prominently today. But as far as sleeping goes in here, it would be rather simple. Depending on the weather, I would tuck myself back here towards the back of the camp. We'd lay a wool blanket down or sleep on the ground, and we'd just pop a few Z's just like that, kind of here in the back of our tent. Depending on the weather conditions, we'd bring our equipment in for the night, keep it under cover here. But this is the exact same setup I would use to sleep and survive overnight in the 18th century. Now, it's not going to be super comfortable, but we know from the journals of these people who lived in this time that it was not super comfortable. I'm a young man, so this doesn't really bother me a whole lot, but I can use my pack, I can use my jacket, I can use parts of what I'm carrying and what I'm wearing to support, you know, say at my neck for a pillow, if that's the kind of thing that you're curious about. But you just tuck in kind of like this. Being at the back, you can be away from most of the weather here and be fairly comfortable through the night. And it's not going to be a whole lot different from a more, you know, modern, more contemporary camping setup. If you're used to that kind of thing. Oh my, our bacon's a little overdone there while we were yakking. And with my coffee, it's been steeping for a few minutes here, so we're just going to pour a little bit of cold water in here. Try to settle those grounds. In the end here, I think it took a little bit longer than I had hoped to get camp set up and get breakfast, but that's the kind of skill that I can continue to learn and improve on. And that's really the reason for me getting out this morning. I don't have a whole lot of time right now to go out and, you know, and camp for a few days like I would like, but a simple morning like this where I'm spending an hour setting up camp, making breakfast, and learning from that kind of short on-the-clock experience, it gives me a perspective, I think, on how our founders and how the early frontiersmen could have and may have lived and how they could have experienced things. And then it gives me some practice and some training for when I'm able to actually get out there at an event, so I don't look like a total buffoon in front of everybody else at an event. And I do this because I enjoy it, but I also want to bring this up as just an opportunity for folks out there. If you are still working, if you don't have a lot of time, you know, you've got a family and you feel like you can't get to all of the events, all the shoots and matches and camps that you would like to, it doesn't hurt and it doesn't really cost anything to go out into your backyard if you're able to and set up a morning camp and even camp out for the weekend. It's the kind of thing that your family is going to enjoy being a part of, and it's really a good way to get your kids interested. If they see you doing that kind of thing, that kind of exposure ensures that we pass this on to future generations. I know this isn't a powder burning, target blasting experience here this weekend, but this is kind of one of those things that I enjoy that's associated with or muzzle loading adjacent really here. And it's the kind of thing that you can be a part of the community even if you're not out there doing the big flashy fun stuff. You can get out and take your tent, take your tarp, take whatever gear you have. Even if you're not fully kitted out like I'm working towards being here, it's an opportunity, and it's the kind of thing that you can get out and be still a part of this community on your own. And then you kind of learning and getting those experiences ready for when you're able to get out there to one of those big events. I'm Ethan. I love muzzleloading. Thank you so much for being a part of this morning with me here in the woods. I really do appreciate it, and I encourage you to get outside with your muzzleloaders and with your gear whenever you're able. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you next time.